I play a moderate amount of VR games, and in my time, I've done many things. Shot guns, rode minecarts, killed zombies, climbed mountains. The world of VR is an extraordinary and amazing medium to transfer to video games. But my favorite thing to do that I believe shows off the beauty of VR is to use a sword. Melee combat in VR games that incorporate it should always be a priority. Ever since the caveman times, there's a part in every man's brain that tells us when something is dangerous and trying to hurt us, we should pick up a stick and hit it until the danger subsides.
But Jay, I don't like hitting a big thing with a big weapon.
I'm sorry, miss, I only know stuff relatable to men. In the VR space, being able to harness the beauty and glory of a sword, axe, shield, or club is where the value of the VR console shines. In real life, I have to wake up, take a shit, eat breakfast, get out of bed. I don't get to go on adventures to help people, or defeat an evil. Government's usually watching. So in the virtual reality setting, where the strongest aspect is your interactivity and the way the world works around you, medieval combat games have an innate advantage. The desire to adventure, progress, and to conquer. I tried to get into a few VR games that offer such an experience, and only two so far have done a phenomenal job. I can't play Blade and Sorcery anymore since it bores me to tears. The game simply offers nothing to me these days. It's the same experience as being offered a nice, beautiful steak. Then tomorrow, you're offered a bag of original Lay's potato chips. Sure, it's something to eat, but it's not nearly as good as what I've enjoyed previously. I've been spoiled. The two best medieval fantasy melee games I've played recently are Grimlord VR and Legendary Tales 1.0. Now, I'm gonna preface the recommendation with a clear honesty check. In both of these games, I'm friends with a few developers, and they are quite nice. They've asked me kindly to try their games. Now, for brevity's sake, I'm not sponsored, but I did offer them a trade. A trade I tell every developer that requests me to sponsor them or to recommend them, and we're on the same wavelength of exposure. My deal is I won't take a single dollar from you if you put an Easter egg of me in the game. Something small, something moderate, doesn't matter. Call it a business thing or a narcissistic thing. I don't know, but one thing's for sure. I love the sock, and I love to see him doing interesting things. There's two benefits to this. I think it's cool, and it costs the devs nothing. In Grimlord VR and Legendary Tales, the developers were kind enough and devoted enough to their games to honor my request, and so I spent many hours trying their games after purchase. Both of them.
Real quick editor's note. I made it seem like I played it after I got the Easter egg. That's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was I had already played the games, enjoyed them, and then the devs started talking to me. Just wanted to make sure. Like, this is still not sponsored. None of this is sponsored. I wanted to do this.
And in full honesty, there are a couple missteps here and there, but an equally positive step is taken every time. I love and recommend both of these games highly, and I'll tell you why. Keep in mind, these aren't comparisons. These are just two games in the same genre that fill a special niche of mine that I love dearly. We'll start with Grimlord VR. Grimlord VR is developed by Metalcat Interactive that entered early access on June 22nd, 2023. It's on PC VR, MetaQuest, and PSVR 2. A first-person medieval fantasy melee slasher that is inspired by the Souls-like genre. Swords, axes, clubs, bows, magic, shields, and even lots of secrets. Tons of them. Alternate paths, builds, and something quite lovely that I personally enjoy in every adventure game. A large map where you can physically see your progress. Grimlord VR uses a parry combat system which rewards the player through negating all damage by giving them a large skill ceiling to work with. You'll never take damage if you have superior footwork and great enemy pattern recognition. Grimlord starts with you waking up in the deepest parts of a dilapidated prison. You read the basic tutorials and finally find a weapon. Now that you're armed, the game isn't afraid of giving you an enemy to fight. None of them are particularly hard to deal with, but moving forward, there's a simple climbing puzzle mechanic to teach you some basic clambering. Then you're met with the pedestal. My bad, Dan, if it has an official name. The pedestal is a form of a bonfire. You can reset the area you're in and respawn the enemies in exchange for restoring your health. There are health potions, but they're replenished elsewhere. After leaving the jail, you're met with the iconic Souls-like tutorial boss. He's not hard, or at least he wasn't to me, but he was absolutely fun. A decent combat song to usher him in, and he's not a pushover. A decent test of one's VR coordination. When he falls, you're granted his axe head. Now, this is important later. Moving on, you're at the cathedral. Outside is a training yard with two gentlemen. I don't remember their names. One is a knight and the other is a geriatric mage. He's willing to teach you magic if you can show him a magic wand. Moving inside the beautiful castle, there's your room, a blacksmith, a nice lady, and a wheelchair man. Your room has your chest full of usable and previous equipment you might have lost. You can change your armor and pendants. Pendants are necklaces you place around your neck for small passives and bonuses. I'm unsure if armor has an effect on your HP, but for my run, I only use the knight armor. The blacksmith is a nice touch. By spinning the selection boards, you can choose many types of weapons that combo with each other, as long as they're in the same category. An example is you can craft an axe by selecting an axe handle, then any axe head. But if you choose an axe handle, you can't choose a sword head. Makes sense. One gripe I have with choosing a weapon is that it's not exactly the easiest to rotate things. I feel like it should be a little simpler. Remember that axe head we got from the tutorial boss? You can replace the default axe head on an axe handle and use it. This will be our main collectibles throughout the game. Finding crafting components for stronger and better equipment. The blacksmith reluctantly makes your weapon, and if you don't like it, you can recycle it for your resources back in your matter, the game's equivalent of souls. How you doing, little buddy? Pushing gaywards, there's this pretty little fountain, this maiden, and this parallelogram. The woman will take your XP, your matter, and turn it into small stat buffs. Now, I do have a complaint against this matter system, but I'll bring it up later. Above her is the owner of the castle. I can't remember his name. I don't pay attention to any Souls-like story because none of them have anything worth paying attention to, but I remember he says, please defeat the evil in the castle. And that is more than enough for me. After prepping my gear, I walk to the pedestal and go to the town. There's a lot of enemies and multiple ways to enter the castle. Basic ghouls and even human enemies. Exploring different ways forward will reward you with different weapon pieces and crafting resources. Eventually, enemy numbers get slightly larger, more armored, new skills, and new areas that branch even farther out.
Yes, sir. Yes, indeed, indubitably. Take this, sir.
Leading up to what is your second boss, a rock golem. Now, I'd love to tell you that this rock golem has an in-depth lore that explains how I'm actually the bad guy, but I don't know if there is. If there is, Metalcat can correct me. Until then, I'm beating the shit out of him. One thing I am going to touch up on in the game is the shield is actually quite useful. It protects a lot, and it feels very useful, almost borderline mandatory. I recommend it if you're having trouble fighting some bosses. After the golem is defeated, there's a pedestal up ahead. After some delving into the castle, you reach one more boss. Again, I don't know anything specific about this guy, if he has a deep lore, or if there's anything interesting about him. But I beat his face in all the same, as per all strength chads are supposed to do. Going forward into the castle, there's a walkway on this castle wall. Here's a little detail I enjoy heavily about Grimlord. I can visually see all the progress I've made up until this point. My starting point, all the way to this wall. I can physically see it. It's nice to actually visualize your record of battle to your exact spot, but it also does something else. If you turn around and look up, the cathedral is extremely tall. This implies an even greater challenge is up ahead. It's the type of adventure detail that every game should take advantage of. And without going further in the game, I'll stop here. Grimlord's VR ability to capture the essence of adventure with the brutality of the enemies, along with nice, interesting loot and a decent equipment system, is worth every penny and every cent spent to enjoy it. However, when I played, there were some mix-ups. Granted, these might have been fixed, but I had a few issues that I just couldn't justify. One of them is the weapon effectiveness. Swords and spears are the best weapons in the game, as of me playing. Swords and spears having a stab allows them to instantly down any enemy that is not wearing protective plate armor. This is nice. However, if you use an axe, a mace, a club, or anything that can't pierce, you'll be subjected to the enemy's health and stagger meters. Swords ignore these with well-placed stabs in the right position. This coincides with the crafting as well. Weapons with great stats are often the unique type of piece that are found from bosses, secrets, or etc. But if the weapon is not a sword or a spear, it doesn't matter. The first sword you find in the game is the best weapon I was able to use. Then there's your potions. Taking damage in games is inevitable. At some point, your health will be low and you'll be at risk of death. It's how Souls-likes work. Everyone has died at some point. To remedy the near-death situation, you're given an Estus flask, or the equivalent of it. In Grimlord, you can find potions to replenish your HP. These spawn in crates randomly around the map. To get your frequently respawning potions, you have to acquire them from the parallelogram in the chapel, but you only get one. To stockpile potions, you have to find them and just not use them. This creates a strange type of gameplay loop of rewarding people for not taking damage by giving them a healing potion for damage they didn't take. I personally suggest a potion that gains 1/6 of its charge back per enemy killed to reward a successful playstyle, similar to Lies of P. There's also parry sweet spots. Now, it makes sense that if you hit an enemy's sword away with your sword, it should parry, right? Well, there's sweet spots on certain enemies that only certain portions of their weapons are parryable. The halberd enemy is the specific one I'm mentioning. If you know anything about this weapon, it's a polearm, meaning it's a big stick with a blade on the end. If you were to stop its momentum here, then the weapon is still defendable, especially since the business end is only this. However, in Grimlord, the only area to parry his weapon is the blade, but you'll still take damage even if you avoid it. making this fight an issue. Now, this issue isn't unique to just him, but most enemies use swords and maces, extending their hitboxes and making a parry not that much of a problem. Then there's the matter upgrade system. Killing enemies has them drop matter. Matter is then used for blacksmith currency in the skill tree from the woman. I dislike this tree due to the fact you're limited in your total upgrades, and some of them are quite expensive. Some upgrades cost hundreds of matter, when you only get about 20 to 30 each kill. They're also less useful than they look. The only one that really matters is more HP, since if the enemy slips past your parry, you'll need more health to take the hit. Now, obviously, the game is still in early access, so I'm not entirely dismissing the skill tree, but it definitely needs some polish. One last thing. Grimlord did a wonderful job mimicking Souls-likes. It fucking sucks to fight more than one enemy at a time, hence why the quick dispatch of the sword is what makes it so valuable, not just for killing, but for thinning out the incredibly unfun 1vx playstyle. I recommend Grimlord for its immensely fun combat, interesting set pieces, and the journey I'm excited to go on every time I load it up. I hope Metal Cat Studios does a great job at polishing and seeing the game through to its fullest potential in the near future. I'm also humbled and honored that Metal Cat Studios would humor my outlandish request of an Easter egg. I know it's not an ordinary one, but, you know, doesn't cost them anything, and I review their game fairly. I feel that's commendable in a narcissistic way. Just a quick reminder, this video is not sponsored. I'm doing this to show you some good games that deserve recognition. But just quickly, I am making a cowboy game called Chambers with Mr. Pink, the creator of Golden Light. Please wishlist it on Steam. Now, I've covered this VR game in the past, but time is a train that stops for no one, and Urban Wolf Games has taken advantage of this. Legendary Tales, when it first released, was a roguelike-esque RPG medieval slasher, with its dormant town, randomized dungeons, and extremely fun RPG mechanics, responsive combat, and interesting progression system. Recently, Legendary Tales came out with a 1.0 complete overhaul of the previous game, removing the roguelike gameplay and replacing it with a semi-open world Souls-like adventure style. In the original Legendary Tales, the town was where you spend a majority of your time. Once you were ready, you traveled into the Abbey with your equipment and battled skeletons, goblins, and a few other unique enemies. Using magic or well-placed parries and strikes, you descended down the levels to take down the evil covering the land. This was fun and interesting, and adding multiplayer to the mix made it even better. I am acquaintances with the game's director BJ. His team is all Korean, so I'll try to pronounce him and his team's names correctly if they do come up. There were quality of life changes that were desperately needed that I pleaded to BJ to add or fix. One of them was the heavy attack cooldown. Attacking too quickly lowered your max damage. This makes sense from a balance perspective. On the downside, it doesn't make sense from a player perspective. I understand a 0.3 or a 0.4 second cooldown on heavy attacks to stop people from machine gunning their weapons. It seems like a simple way to wind up attacks consistently. The original timing of the heavy attacks seemed like it was like 5 seconds or something. That was way too long for strength characters, since there are multiple enemies at once in some instances that strength characters cannot dispatch quickly. BJ looked at this version of the game and made severe overhaul changes that cost him 2 years of development, and now it's back, and it's better than ever before. First off, the town is not here anymore. We're at a refugee camp full of caravans.
There's the alchemist, the blacksmith, and the gambling woman.
Moving on, there's this table, a cauldron, a strange crusher of some kind, and an entire blacksmithing operation. In order of appearance, the blacksmith sells weapons and armor that offers quests. Outside of his caravan is the recycler. Placing weapons and armor inside will turn them into wood, metals, and magic powders. To the right is the cauldron. On a ratio of 3 to 1, 3 iron to 1 titanium, you can upgrade your materials. Works on wood, metals, and previously mentioned powders. Alternatively, you can throw weapons in the cauldron to turn them back into crystals to trade with your multiplayer partners. To the right of the cauldron is the selling table, letting you turn all spare equipment into gold. Next is the alchemist. She doesn't do much, save for selling you whetstones, bowstrings, and letting you craft potions. In the launch version of Legendary Tales, she sold potions, but she does not anymore. Using 2 blood chunks, you can make a health potion. Using 2 mana chunks, make a mana potion. Using a mana and a blood chunk can make an elixir, doing both jobs, but not as good as the dedicated potions. To her right is the teleport rune. Takes you to the other runes you found in the world. To the right of the teleport rune is the gambling tent, allowing you to spend gold to gain random rarities of a specific category that you choose to purchase. Then on to one of the biggest adjustments in 1.0. The blacksmithing station. Going to the bellows, there's a board that lets you pick the metallic portion of your weapons. Heads, blades, frames are all crafted here. Using materials, you can add up to 10 to make a part of the same level as you are. Iron gives 1 level, titanium gives 4, and the gold material gives 7. So if you're level 7, you can do 7 iron, 1 titanium and 3 iron, or 1 gold. You can only add 10 items to the bellows, so if you're level 11, you can't place 11 iron, so you'll eventually need better materials. Once added and processed, you craft an ingot that you can place on the anvil to hammer into your part. Take the part to the water quickly and it will cool down to a usable piece. Find the handle to the head you have and repeat the process, only this time with wood. Create the handle, place the head, and you've crafted your own weapon. Now keep in mind, you can't mix and match these, by the way. But you're not done yet. Buying a whetstone from the alchemist will let you upgrade the weapon's quality. Grabbing magic powder from your backpack, and depending on the quality, it will change the rank of your whetstone if you use it next to it. The ranks of whetstones go normal, blue, yellow, purple, and then orange legendary. Orange whetstones will transform your weapon into a legendary weapon. Purple will give you the best rank of the weapon you have in your hand. You can also name your weapon on the pedestal to the right, allowing you to re-roll the stats for increased expenses. To the left of the blacksmith is a training dummy, allowing you to try your new weapons. I recommend practicing the heavy attack to see exactly the cooldown timing between heavy and light attacks.
I didn't choose to look like this. I didn't choose this. So do you get powder from scrapping yarn?
Sorry.
What?
I'm sorry. It struck me like a lightning bolt. Now it's time for adventure. Leaving the camp, there are a few enemies, branching paths, and some side quests to complete. Defeating some enemies, you'll eventually level up. There's 2 types of leveling up, utility skills and primary skills. Utility skills are things like vitality, wisdom, and luck. Vitality raises max HP, wisdom raises max mana, and luck raises crit chance and drop rarity chance. Strength, dexterity, and intelligence are raised from using weapons related to that skill and is raised from gear. For example, a 2-handed sword will level up strength and a spear will level up dexterity. Primary skills are skills you spend skill points on. Now keep this in mind and make sure you never forget, this game is not experiment friendly. I had to fight and beg BJ to add a respec system. I made all the good points I possibly could give to make sure respecs were added to the game, and BJ met me only a 10th of the way by giving you a respec point after you beat the game. Now by the time this video goes live, there might be some adjustments and changes, but at this time, if you're going to make a build, stick to it, because skill points are rare and you don't get very many of them. Strength builds involve increasing physical damage immensely, dex builds are frail but strong critical damage, and wizards conjure the power of God at the flick of a wrist. Sadly, that same flick can cause carpal tunnel. If you can manage your skills, equipment, and personal skill correctly, you'll be golden. Moving on and taking out more enemies, if you look around, you'll find a mini-boss. Yes, a mini. This skeleton gladiator is an extremely tough cookie, and the first wall that will tell the player you're here to sweat. So it's time to sweat. Defeating him, down the way there's a dungeon. Inside the dungeon are many branching paths, a few champion bosses, story quest items, and tons of loot. Now it's up to us as a player to follow the story. You'll be pushed further and further until you meet the endgame bosses. I won't spoil how they play, but they are extremely hard and almost seem unfair. Just don't forget to dedicate your points to one build, and if you work with it, you'll be fine. After beating the story, you unlock challenge mode and permadeath mode. Challenge mode makes all enemies level 50 and gives every enemy new attack patterns. So there's a lot of game here. Easily worth the asking price and easily worth the time. Sadly though, there are many things that hold back Legendary Tales in terms of gameplay and experience. A few downsides include shields. When an enemy strikes a shield, it's not considered a parry. They can slide off of the shield and the attack can still connect. There's skills to make shields stronger and give damage reduction, but I believe it's like this to encourage the parry system. But it's a shield. It should be incredibly useful all the time. If you dedicate your build to it, that is. Another is height. Now, no disrespect to the entire country of Korea, but I am tall. I'm 6'3", 190 centimeters tall. Goblins, underswings, and magic attacks all aim for my feet. Again, I'm pretty dang tall, and I tower over many of the game's enemies. All enemy goblins, all magical enemies, every boss, this leaves me at a disadvantage. And because of this, I can't use one-handed weapons. It sucks and it makes me sad. I try to block underhands, but I'm so large and the one-handers are so short that I can't defend myself.
But Jay, just squat or crouch.
Well, one, I fucking hate squatting due to my immense back pain, and two, on a real reason, certain enemy attacks are too fast to predict reliably every time. So unless I'm constantly down low or sitting down, I can't defend from every position. I fucking bitched about this 2 years ago and it's still exactly the same.
Fuck the goblins. They need to be taller and skinnier. Doing full damage to my toes with uncounterable abilities fucking sucks. I'm 6'3". I can't parry these little fucks.
I remember telling BJ about this and he laughed and sent me a video of him beating a goblin boss with my build. BJ is 2.5 feet shorter than me. Again, I'm not making fun of him, I'm pointing out a flaw because of something I can't change. The game is more difficult for me and I am locked out of a sword and shield build because I physically cannot use the weapons effectively and one of them just isn't that helpful. Another is a balance decision. Remember that heavy attack cooldown I spoke about? It's still in the game. It's been toned down, but it's still there. BJ tried to explain to me fairly about how if it wasn't in the game, the strength builds would be OP. It makes sense, but whatever the timer is, it should have a way to be shortened, or add a skill that removes or shortens it even further, or communicate with the player when a heavy attack is available so I can time my swings. Currently in the game, strength builds are some of the weaker choices of classes. Dexterity builds get really high crit chances and crit bonuses. On top of bows, magic is incredibly fucking broken with all the damage attached to it. The only caveat is that wizards use mana more, so it's a resource balance situation. Currently, strength or tank builds are few and far between. It is really difficult to take many hits and do decent damage, so you're not sitting there getting demolished. Going full strength and full damage will make your heavy attacks really strong, but you're held back by the heavy attack cooldown restricting your damage, and the fact you can't take many hits. Even stacking vitality will still cause enemies to hurt you dearly. Goblins are still too short, and I fucking hate them, especially since they have a lot of health. And lastly are respecs. I said before that when you make a build, make sure to dedicate your points to your build. Make sure you stick to it on your first playthrough. If you go strength, magic, dex, bows, daggers, stay there. Stay to that class because respecs are rare and you aren't getting more unless you beat the game. In most RPGs, they want you to make your choices or experiment, which is fine, but smart developers will realize the average player is a fucking moron and they will make mistakes. In those instances, a respec should be available, be it a rare drop, an expensive purchase, or a quest reward. But in RPGs such as Legendary Tales, there are skills that unlock more special traits the more you level them up. You would not know this unless you put the points into them. And at higher levels, skills can cost multiple skill points just to upgrade them, like the vitality increase. It raises max HP the first couple of points, then it makes your vitality give more HP than it did before. You wouldn't know this unless you dedicated a lot of points to see if it worked. So I did what I normally do when I'm friends with developers, and I bitched at him. Here was my awful build at the beginning of the game. I used two-handers for strength, split right down the middle with shielded one-handers in defense. Because of this, I had no damage, and I was also not tanky, due to my lack of dedication to the tree. 100%, this is my fault. But in my defense, I figured since I was still on the strength weapon tree, I assumed they'd be interchangeable. They are not. So I messaged BJ and suggested the idea of a respec. He understood my pain, and a week later, respecs were added. After you beat the game! I couldn't have been more angry in my life. I was still having absolutely no fun in the game because in late game, I needed to be doing my best, and I've wasted my entire skill set. BJ offered me a challenge. He offered to give me 100 respec points, but I can only use one. If I use more than one, he would take away my Easter egg in the camp. I understood the risks and I accepted the challenge. With one respec point, the game was night and day to me. My damage was through the roof, my survivability skyrocketed. I felt like the warrior class I was meant to be from the start. With this newfound power, I slaughtered all of the bosses to the endgame and met the Skeleton King. He is so cool. And here's 30 seconds of uninterrupted gameplay. Really, BJ? Come the fuck on! And they're parry resistant? Wrapping this up, you're welcome for the respecs. I hope you consider both of these games, as I enjoy both of them dearly. Legendary Tales and Grimlord VR are on all forms of VR currently, and are worth all the time spent in both of them. I hope you've enjoyed the video, as I have 3 more sock sites coming and I will get to work soon. Have a wonderful rest of your week.